on your guard. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world.
Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled around their shores.
It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
You know, there was a time in this country when smart people were considered cool. Well, maybe not cool, but smart people did things like build ships and pyramids, and they even went to the moon.
The Great Conjunction is the end of the world! Oh, the beginning?
But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light.
What you said just now is quite extraordinary.
You're listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina.
Greetings, guys and dolls. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Extraordinary. As always, I'm Natalina, and I'm coming to you from my little slice o' paradise on the border between Minnesota and my beloved North Dakota. I've got a really good show for you today. I cannot wait to introduce you to my wonderful and dynamic guest. You're going to love him. I certainly do, and we're going to get into all of that in just a little bit. But the very start of the show, I want to do something a little bit different. Those of you who are regular listeners or who contribute in our EI discussion group know that I haven't really been available too much to my listeners recently because I have been traveling. I've been away for about a better part of a month and a half pretty consistently. My dad has been very ill and hospitalized, and as a result, I've been home taking care of my mom and checking in on my dad and just helping keep it, the family wheels turning. And so I've been really preoccupied with this personal family stuff. And as a result, I've really not been keeping up with the correspondence that I've been receiving, whether it's via email, on Facebook, wherever the case may be. I haven't replied as much as I should. I usually try to be really good about replying to everything that comes through, and I do read it all. But I get such an avalanche of email, and then when I get behind, I lose track. And so anyway, the point is I haven't really been very good at responding to it. So what I want to do just in this beginning introduction to this episode is I want to read a few emails that I've received that I didn't get a chance to reply to, and just read them on the show because I believe they contain some information that might be of interest to the audience at large. So without any further ado, let me jump into one of these emails right now. This first one comes from a reader named Megan, and Megan says, "Hi Natalina, you and your family were put on my heart today, so I just wanted to send a quick note and say that I hope your family situation that you spoke of a few podcasts ago went well, and I've been praying for you. Thank you for all that you do, and may you continue to do wonderful things for God's kingdom." Well, thank you, Megan. It's a very nice email. And I want to say to you, Megan, and I want to say to everyone out there, my extended Beyond Extraordinary family and Extraordinary Intelligence family, I just want to send my gratitude for all of the prayers and all of the love and all of the generosity. This has been one of the most trying times of my life, to be perfectly honest with you. And we're certainly not out of the woods yet, but I will tell you that my dad has gotten a lot better. His turnaround has actually been nothing short of miraculous. I don't get into the specifics of what's going on with him. It's not, it's his business. It's not mine to share. But suffice to say, he was very sick, so sick that we didn't know if he was going to make it. And, he's doing incredibly well now. He's made quite a turnaround, and that is thanks in no small part to what I believe has been just an amazing rally of prayer from all of you. And so many of you have shared with me that you've been praying for my dad and praying for my family, and it's very humbling that you are also completely loving and sweet and consistent with your prayers. And so thank you all for that. And I also wanted to just say thank you to those of you who have generously given gifts to my through my website, through the donation section. Your help has made it possible for me to cover some of the expenses of these unexpected traveling, gas money, car repairs, all of that, food. I probably wouldn't have been able to do it without so much generous help from all of you. And, it's really wonderful because we have so many disagreements as Christians. Sometimes it feels like we're just at each other's throats and picking each other apart. But when one of us is in need, when one of us is having a hard time, when one of us is struggling, we just rally. We rally for one another. And you've all just blessed me. And I can only hope that someday I can return the blessing to you, because your prayers have worked. God is moving. God is great. Your petitions have been heard, received, and manifested, and your generosity has humbled me. And I am more grateful than you could possibly imagine. So I'm going to move on from that topic because I don't want to cry. So let's move on to this email I got from a listener named Gina. Gina writes, thank you for making your podcasts available on Stitcher. I was downloading them through Revelations Radio Network, and since there are so many shows on that network, I sometimes missed your latest episodes. I got the Stitcher app on my iPhone after iTunes separated music from podcasts, and I was never happy with it after that until I found Stitcher. One of the episodes I missed and just recently listened to yesterday was the one on spectrophilia. And at the beginning, you were discussing Stitcher. I thought I would throw in my 2 cents about it. I don't know if there are better podcast catchers, but this one has been working out pretty well for me, and it is free. Thanks for all you do, and God bless. Well, thank you, Gina, for letting me know that, because I still have not really checked out Stitcher all that much, but I did sign up a Beyond Extraordinary podcast to Stitcher, and it's really cool to hear from someone who has used it and that it's working so well. So for anyone out there who wants to look for a better way to gain access to the feed of this show so that you don't miss an episode, Gina says that Stitcher works really great. So if you go to extraordinaryintelligence.com, in the right-hand sidebar, you will see a link that says Stitcher. It's like an image link, and it'll take you right to Stitcher where you can subscribe there. And then there's also buttons to iTunes or to the RSS feed directly to extraordinaryintelligence.com. If you don't want to miss any episodes, you can certainly find all of the pertinent info on extraordinaryintelligence.com. So thanks. Thank you, Gina. That's really cool to hear. I'm glad Stitcher is working out for you. And one of these days I will figure out all about Stitcher. So, moving on. I've got an email here from a dude named Brent. And Brent says, Natalina, I've been following your show since the beginning, and I admire your willingness to have guests with a wide variety of perspectives. You are not afraid to go places that other Christian broadcasts don't want to touch. And I was wondering if you would ever consider doing something really daring, such as having an open Satanist or occultist as a guest. I appreciate how you like to give your guests the opportunity to share their points of view unfiltered, but I was just curious how you would handle a situation like that. Well, Brent, thank you. That is something that I strive to do with the show. I want to expose my audience to a variety of perspectives and viewpoints and worldviews. I don't do this because I am trying to influence my audience to receive or to buy into necessarily all of the information that comes out of some of my guests. I don't always agree with my guests, but I have them on because I believe that they have something of value to share with the audience. And I'm also a firm believer that the only way to really evolve and grow and become more solid in what it is that you hold to be true is to allow yourself to be challenged. When you can be open enough to give someone an opportunity to share their worldview or their perspective with you, whether or not it is anything that you agree with, it allows you to have your own views challenged and as a result become better informed about what it is that you believe and be more able to defend what you believe, which we are called to do in Scripture, right? And, whether it's your faith life or whether it's your political ideology or whatever the case is, it is important. It is vitally important, in my opinion, to hear from people of various walks of life and various points of view so that you really know what other people think, why they think it, and how they got to that place. It's all good, right? It should not be scary to listen to something or someone that doesn't necessarily line up with what you believe. It shouldn't be frightening at all. If you are firm in your convictions, then it shouldn't be a threat. And you may find even during tonight's show that my guest will say some things that you don't necessarily agree with or have a theology that doesn't necessarily line up with yours. And that's okay. It's okay to disagree with people, and it's also okay to listen to the people with whom you disagree. Get it? Got it? You might learn something. So that's what I strive for, and I'm glad, Brent, that you noticed that and you appreciate that. But to your question about whether or not I would necessarily have an open Satanist on my show, right now my answer is no. And that's for a few reasons. Not that I'm afraid to talk to a Satanist. I've spoken to Satanists in the past. I've been friends with Satanists. Back before I was a Christian, I had several friends who called themselves Satanists or Luciferians. They're not necessarily scary people just in their outward selves. Most of the time, they're just confused agnostics, to be quite honest, who are depressed and lost. But to someone who is proclaiming to be like a theological Satanist, in other words, someone who believes in Satan and worships Satan, no, I have no interest in having that person on my show. I do not necessarily see what the point would be at the, right now with what I'm trying to achieve. I don't see what the fruit of that would be. And I don't necessarily want to expose my audience to that. We are at diametrically opposing ends of the spectrum. I can pray for that person, that God would reveal himself to them, but I'm not really interested in having them on my show right now. I don't know what it would necessarily contribute to the dialogue. But when it comes to the question of whether or not I would have an occultist, it really depends on what that means. If that means someone who has a New Age philosophy, or someone who's engaged in, ancient, archaic type, mystery school religion, whatever, maybe. It would be situational. It would depend on whether or not I felt they had something to contribute to a fruitful conversation. If I felt they had information that could help my audience become better informed, yeah, maybe. A really good example would be my friend Derek Gilbert, who hosts the fabulous podcast View from the Bunker. He has a variety of different guests with a menagerie of worldviews on his show, and he one of his frequent guests, or multiple time guests, multiple appearances, has been Peter Levenda. Now, Peter Levenda, of course, is known for his books, Sinister Forces. He is a historian. He's an occult historian, an expert, and he's certainly not a Christian, but he has information that is valuable to conversations that we as Christians can and should have. And therefore, Derek boldly has this man on his show as his guest because, we can learn something from the guy. And that's kind of my philosophy as well. So, maybe, but it's all situational. And it all depends on what that person could contribute. So, good question. Thank you for giving me a chance to rant it up a little bit. And let me see. What else do I have here? I have an email from someone who is asking me. Oh, okay. So this one is from Lydia, and she just has a really short and sweet little question that says, I always enjoy listening to you sing on your show, and I can tell you really appreciate music. I was wondering what your musical background is. Well, Lydia, I guess you could call what I do on my show singing sometimes. I think it's just more of me being dorky. But I do have a little bit of a musical background. I sing, obviously, and, I've been part of different choirs and I did the wedding singer thing for a while there. It's just something that I've always enjoyed. And then, more prominently, I played the violin until I was in about 8th grade. And then I took up the viola, which I play not as regularly, but I do still play to this day. I played all through high school and, was in a chamber orchestra in college. And, I played for the symphony for a while. And I really, really enjoyed it. I don't do it nearly as much anymore as I would like to. But I am, here's a spoiler alert, a little bit of my fiddling is going to be featured on the upcoming album from my favorite guys out of the UK, Dissident Prophet. So keep your eyes out for that, because I was very fortunate and excited to have been asked by my friend Andy Jennings to contribute to their album with my viola. And I still have something else that I'm supposed to be working on for them, but I've been sidetracked because of all that's been going on with my family. So hopefully I get around to that. Hopefully Andy has not forsaken me at this point. But whether or not I was involved with the album, I would still encourage you to check out Dissident Prophet. They are an incredible band. They make music that is edifying, and it is for His glory, for the glory of God, but also, it is really good, funky music. So, check that out. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it. And then one last email. Which one will it be? See, I thought I had these all organized so I could just click from one email to the next, but I've already lost my place. Where? Oh, okay. This one is from unknown. So this is an unknown listener from an undisclosed location, and this listener writes, Natalina, I am a former Catholic, and one thing that I miss the most about Mass is hearing things spoken in Latin. I recall you mentioning on a previous episode that you do speak Latin, and I was wondering if you would be so kind as to speak a few words of Latin on an upcoming episode. It would be so nice to hear. I was also wondering, because I am a language geek, if you would be willing to talk about any other languages you may know or speak fluently. Thank you so much. I just find it very intriguing and I love everything you do. Unknown. Well, what a weird and interesting email. Particularly odd because I don't recall ever mentioning on the show that I have known a bit of Latin. But I must have, because it's kind of true. So anyway, yeah, I took a number of years of Latin throughout school, and I started I wanted to take a second language, and I started with Espanol, and I didn't like it. No offense to anyone out there who's a native Spanish speaker. I think it's a beautiful language, but I couldn't figure I don't know, it didn't work for me. I didn't have a whole lot of interest in it. So my second choice in becoming bilingual was to study a dead language. So I studied Latin for a number of years and I loved it. Somewhere out there in the archives of the world is a photograph of me and a group of other Latin nerds, and I'm wearing a toga. And the reason that I'm wearing a toga is because it was myself and this group of people, and we had all achieved summa cum laude or cum laude on the national Latin exam. So that was the reason for that. But in any case, that's been so long ago, many years ago, and I don't remember a whole lot of Latin anymore. But I do have a few things just memorized that I can throw out off the top of my head, and they're kind of churchy sounding. So I can give you just the first couple of lines of Psalm 150. I know the whole thing, but a lot of it is really shaky, but I have the first couple of lines down, and you can open your Bible for a translation. But Psalm 150 is Laudate Dominum in sanctis eius, laudate eam in firmamento tutis eius. Let me try that again. Laudate Dominum in sanctis eius, laudate eam in firmamento tutis eius. So that's one, and then I can say Sancti Dominus Deus, Eus Sabaoth Planisunt Celi et Terra, Gloria Gloria Tua, Hosanna in excelsis. Well, that's all you get. I hope that was enough to tide you over. Certainly, not too good at Latin anymore, but, maybe I should get back into it. Anyway, speaking of other languages, here's a little something for you that might blow your mind. I have a few phrases in Swahili, of all things, that I can say. And anyone out there who went to college with me or knew me when I was in college will probably know why I know this. But let's see. Viumbe vyote vya Mungu wetu na mfalme wetu. Pazeni sauti ili nasi mwimbe watu wote. Viumbe vyote awaye yote tusifu Mungu. There you go. So, and that's about it. All right. Let's see. Moving on. Well, that's the last email I'm going to do. I thank everyone for sending me all of your messages via Facebook or through the contact form at extraordinaryintelligence.com. I'm going to do my best to reply to those of you who I did not reply to today, and there are lots and lots and lots of you. So I've read them all. I just haven't had the opportunity to reply to most of them. But keep them coming, because I really do enjoy hearing your thoughts, whether they are affirmative or negative. So let's get into the subject of tonight's program, shall we? My guest that I'm really excited to introduce you to is a man named Ralph Sarchie. There's a currently in theaters, maybe for another, I don't know how, week or so, called Deliver Us from Evil, and it was directed by Scott Derrickson, who himself is a Christian, starring Eric Bana, Joel McHale, who I love from one of my favorite shows, Community. And this movie is really, really interesting. It's pretty scary. If you don't like horror films, I wouldn't go see it, but unless you just really prepare yourself. But it's a really interesting film, and it's based on a real person, and that person is Sergeant Ralph Sarchie, who was a cop for the NYPD, working in one of the most violent areas in the country. And through his work, he ended up with a very interesting side job, which ended up kind of becoming his primary job, which was demonology. And he ended up assisting in a lot of exorcisms, and he still does that to this day. So when I first heard the story of Ralph Sarchie's life, I really wanted to talk to him. And I looked into how to contact him, and I finally tracked him down, and I took a risk and reached out to him and asked him if he would be interested in coming on the show. And to my delight, he agreed. So, and through that, I got to know that this Ralph Sarchie, who at first comes off as very tough, very stern, he's actually quite kind and gentle and very serious about what he does. He's also funny and charming, and I really, really enjoyed it, getting to know him. So I think you're going to like listening to him as well. As I said, you may not agree with everything that he has to say, but as always, when I invite a guest on, I do just I just listen to what they have to say. I do not believe that it is my place to argue with my guests on any points with which I disagree, because, people end up feeling ambushed that way. So I just let Ralph talk, as I do with all my other guests, and I came away from it just really, really liking the guy, and so I would be very interested in hearing what you all think after listening to this interview. And make sure you stick around all the way to the end, after the end credits, because I've got a cute little bonus clip of Ralph and I talking off the record that I think is going to make you giggle. And other than that, I hope that you are filled with great joyfulness with this podcast, or as we would say in Latin, jubilationes. So thank you so much. God bless. And here we go with Ralph Sarchie.
As a cop, put the job first.
I understand the hours you gotta work, but even when you're here, you're not here.
Hi, Daddy. I love you, and I wish you were home.
I came to see Officer Sarchie.
Met a lot of priests. You don't seem the type.
And I've known a lot of cops, and you're exactly the type.
I walk through the sewer every night. I've seen some horrible things, and nothing that can't be explained by human nature.
Then you haven't seen true evil.
These crazy ladies complaining about strange disturbances, noises.
After you. What's this writing mean?
I've experienced two types of evil in this life. Secondary evil, the evil that men do, and primary evil, which is something else entirely. You cannot fight it in the usual way. You'll hear three voices. One of the voices is coming from a 5-year-old girl. Every culture, every religion has practiced exorcism.
I've had a darkness growing inside of me. Some
happening to me. Tell me you saw that.
You can sense what others can't. But it also puts you at risk. Your family is already in danger.
Mommy.
Let's begin.
¿Cuál es tu nombre?
The 46th precinct in the Bronx is a dangerous place. It's violent. So violent that it has earned the nickname the Alamo. To be a cop in such an area is not a feat that most men could endure, but for NYPD officer Ralph Sarchie, this was a reality until he retired in 2004 as a decorated sergeant. However, as dangerous as the flesh and blood criminals could be, Ralph took on a second job, facing even more sinister foes. In what he refers to as the work, Ralph Sarchie began investigating cases of demonic possession and assisting in the exorcisms of humanity's most ancient enemies. In his 2001 book titled Beware the Night, Ralph chronicles the many encounters with evil that he's had while doing the work. His story is so fascinating that it captivated even Hollywood producers, and it was recently was the inspiration for the film Deliver Us from Evil, which is now in theaters. I was so captivated myself by this unique story of a cop who moonlights as a demonologist that I had to track Mr. Sarchie down and ask him to come on the show. And to my delight, he agreed to do it. So it's a privilege to welcome Ralph Sarchie to Beyond Extraordinary. Ralph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're really excited. I gave a little bit of a teaser to my audience that you were coming on, and they're just thrilled because your one of the things we focus on a lot on my show and on my website is this idea of the supernatural, but through a Christian perspective. And so much of what we see in film and on television does deal with the supernatural, but so rarely do you see it through that Christian lens and through that biblical lens. So when a story like yours comes along, it's something that really interests people. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of all of the things that you've been through, I just have to ask you, how does it feel to have this major Hollywood studio release a film inspired by your life? Is it kind of surreal? Not many people can put that on their resume.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of mixed emotions about it, but I just serve God's will and I go along with His plan. And if this was in His plan, then who am I to say that I'm unhappy with it? But I don't really like the publicity and I don't like the attention. But that'll go away soon, hopefully.
Well, I don't know. Your story has really reached a lot of people, so you might have it might stretch out for a while. But I heard that you had actually spoken to director Scott Derrickson some years ago about your experiences, and as a result of that encounter, you inspired him in some ways to make the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Is that true? Is there truth to that story?
Well, yeah, back in 2003, Scott Derrickson and Paul Boardman were hired by Jerry Bruckheimer to write the first draft of the screenplay, which was originally called Beware the Night. And they practically lived in my house for about 4 days, and I was showing them all of my tapes and of exorcisms and the things that I've come across. And I let Scott hear. I had a 4-minute excerpt of the Annalise Michelle's exorcism that I obtained from Ed Warren, and there were none of those tapes were out in circulation at that point. I mean, now you can go on the internet and you can hear, you can hear Annalise Michelle's exorcism.
Right.
But back then it was a pretty obscure tape to have, and I only got it through Ed Warren. And I let Scott and Paul hear it, and then I gave Scott an out-of-print copy of The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and they decided that they were going to option it and make it a movie.
That in and of itself is a very chilling story, and probably one of the most chilling that I'd heard of until I read your book and looked into some of the things that you've dealt with. But before we get into that, I just want to know, did you always want to be a cop, Ralph?
No, I always wanted to be a baseball player.
Oh.
And, you know, I was realistic about it. I wasn't good enough to become a major leaguer. So as I got older and I realized that, you know, I don't think I'm going to be pitching on the mound at Yankee Stadium, I decided to become a cop, and that's where I went.
So is there truth to the little conversation that happened in the movie where your partner was wearing a Boston hat and you're obviously a Yankees fan?
Well, no, that was no one up in the Bronx wore a Boston Red Sox hat. You know, you're taking your life into your own hands, cop or not. No, that was just a little levity that Scott had put in there, and that was even kept a secret from me until they actually brought Joel McHale in to do his screen test, and they had him in a Boston Red Sox jersey at first, and you know the wardrobe manager just had this big smirk on his face because he was giving me the business on that one, you know. But Scott pared it down to the hat. But I just thought it was a great piece for the film to show, you know, how cops, you know, relate to each other. You know, that's what that was pretty much all about.
Sure, it was a really lighthearted and cute scene, and it kind of set the tone for that New York pride that, you know, those of us who aren't from your area, but we always hear about it, and it's kind of a special place to live, I think. But what we do know is that where you worked as a cop is one of the most violent precincts in the country, and you faced your fair share of evil before ever becoming involved in demonology. Are there parallels between the work you did as a cop and the toughness that you had to exhibit and the work done in confronting demons?
Well, you know, that's a really good question because, you know, I like to say that God chooses people that, you know, can stand in the face of evil, but you don't have to be tough to do that. You have to have faith and spirituality. That's all you need. You don't really need toughness. And, you know, I know some women that have absolutely no problem getting in there and doing the work. You know, in fact, they get in touch with me. They want to do it, and that's it. So, you know, we'll see.
Well, you know, I imagine it's something that's not really, you know, it is a calling, and that comes through very much so in your story. What are the events that led to you becoming involved in what you call the work? Was there a specific case, or was there, you know, a progression of things? What happened there?
Yeah, I would have to say that it was a progression of things, and it was subtle. There wasn't anything major. I never experienced any kind of preternatural or supernatural phenomenon when I was growing up. It was just a matter of, I always did have faith. I always knew God existed, and I always knew that the devil existed for some reason. I never had doubts on either one. I was an altar boy when I was a kid. You know, I was religious, and I do think that if I had gone to a Catholic high school, I probably would have entered the priesthood. But I don't think that that's what God had in store for me, because he elected to put me into life outside of religion. You know, the religious life, I should say.
Right.
So it's just a matter of reading books. When I was a kid, I was an avid reader, and I loved to read. And I would read, well, give me a book that I loved, and I would read it in one day. Give me a book I hated, and I couldn't get out of the first chapter for a week. So, you know, I love books about cops, military history, firemen, and ghost stories.
And so all of that, unbeknownst to you, was kind of leading you and preparing you for multiple facets of what you were going to ultimately end up doing. You know, I read that when you were very little, you were very, very sick. And your mother has been quoted as saying that she believes the Lord healed you and preserved you for what you're doing today. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you with that illness.
Well, from what they tell me, I think it was like 10 months old, I had a very serious case of asthma. And it did put me in the hospital. I don't remember much of it. I remember I got little snapshots of it in my mind. If you could believe that I could remember little snippets of things, I can. But, you know, there are a lot of other people out in this world that, you know, were told that they were going to die and they still live. So I don't look at myself as something special in that regard. The way I look at it is that every single person on this earth is called by God to do a specific task. And, you know, I try not to look at it like that because, how can I put this? I try to remain in a state, basically, I can give it to you in a nutshell, in Scripture where Jesus basically says that, you know, don't rejoice that demons are subject to you in my name. Just rejoice that your name is written in the book of life. That's the only thing I keep my eyes on, is that I try to do whatever I can to be pleasing to God so I can have a relationship with him. And when I die and I get judged, he accepts me into heaven and he doesn't cast me away. That's what the journey in my life is all about, and that's what the journey in everybody's life should be about, is joining with God at the end. Not what we can get in this world, you know, not how much money we can accumulate and how many nice cars and the biggest houses, and, you know, it's the soul that we should be worried about, and a lot of people out there don't even realize they have one.
That's true. That's really true. And one of the things that we discuss a lot on this show, it's kind of been a running theme, is that there's this idea that the world is becoming increasingly accepting of supernatural phenomena, but rather than embracing a Christian worldview, the spirituality is kind of becoming more pagan. You know, you've got these shows like Ghost Hunters, you've got all these wacky paranormal investigators that everyone looks to, and meanwhile, many devout Christians themselves have a really hard time accepting supernatural phenomena, which is a pity because the Bible itself is a wholly supernatural book. And we're told in Ephesians 6, paraphrasing, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, rulers of wickedness in heavenly places. And we're supposed to stand against these dark forces. So why do you think it's so difficult for professing Christians to believe that the supernatural realm is something that manifests in our world? Why, of all people, are Christians sort of hesitant to take that extra step?
Well, I feel it's because they live actually in the physical world and they don't even approach the spiritual world even on a Sunday. They don't know how. You know, it's superficial. They'll go to Mass every Sunday, but they're really not there. They're thinking about, well, I'm going to wash my car when I get home. And, you know, they're thinking about that bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich that they got sitting, you know, at the deli waiting for them. And they're not really paying attention and giving God their all. So they miss out on all of that supernatural realm that when you connect with God, he acts all around you. He puts people in your path that further your knowledge of him and get you closer to him. He will give you the right saint that will guide you and give you the inspiration that you need to live your life the way he wants us to live. That's what the saints are all about. That's God's mercy. He wants us to live a certain way. So instead of letting us guess about it, he gives us these saintly people who have lived life the way he wants us to live. He uses models. It's rather simple. Emulate somebody who loves the Lord. And you pretty much got it in the bag at that point, unless you screw it up somehow.
Right. Right. And I think that is something that I suppose as all Christians we struggle with, but it does seem to me that just because of all of the things that we learn about in the Bible and in the gospel and Jesus's ministry on earth, it baffles me that Christians are so, they're almost more naturalists, where they hear about this stuff and they don't even want to hear it because they don't want to be perceived by the rest of the world as crazy or, somehow different. But, it's unfortunate, but it's why stories like yours are important, because it proves through some, everything that I've read about you and I perceive about you, you're a very rational person, and the people with whom you encounter are other people that you've worked with on the police force. And that leads me to my next question. How did your fellow cops react when you started doing this work that you got involved with?
Well, there were all different reactions to it. Some people believed me, some people didn't. Some people got funny about it. Some people were serious about it. There was a whole different array of interactions that I've had. Some got stupid, they would do some stupid things, but that's how cops are sometimes. We have a twisted, warped sense of humor. And it's, it's camaraderie. It's how we relate to each other for the most part.
Sure. There's just playful ribbing and but for the most part, it sounds like, you were accepted and nobody, didn't want to work with you anymore or anything like that.
Oh, no, there wasn't anything like that. No.
Oh, good.
Nothing not that I knew of. I didn't know if anybody was saying this behind my back or not, but they never said it to my face, so I really wouldn't know.
Well, I want to get into some of the details about the specifics and of the things that you went through. And one of what I would like to ask you is, do you remember the first actual case you were involved in where you could say, yes, there was demonic manifestation or possession involved? Do you remember the first encounter you had?
To pinpoint the first case that I ever went on, I can't do that, to tell you the truth. I don't remember what it was. All I know is that all of the cases that I were involved in, that I was involved with as an assistant during solemn exorcisms, there was some kind of a form or level of possession. Not all cases that I were involved in were actual possessions. A lot were oppression cases, obsession cases, which are handled basically in the same manner as a solemn exorcism. It's just that the Pope Leo XIII prayer, which is a minor form of exorcism, would be used instead of the Roman ritual. And it can always be changed. If we find out that it isn't an impression or an obsession case, and it is actually possession, the exorcist can simply just go get his Roman ritual and start the solemn exorcism. So there was a lot of different things that we can employ, but it does depend on the power of the demon.
Sure. Now, can you, for the audience, discuss the difference between the different stages, whether it's infestation, oppression, or possession? Did I get that right?
Yes. Basically, the infestation is the beginning stage of diabolical activity, and it refers to a person's home. That's where the little bits of phenomenon would come about. It's usually subtle at first. It could, and it builds up. Hold on 1 minute.
Certainly.
So, where was I? The oppression obsession stage it's a two-part attack. the oppression is basically the infestation is still happening, but it becomes heightened. The phenomenon becomes worse now. Usually during the oppression stage, there is no doubt that there is something in that house that that's not nice.
Right.
The oppression stage is the internal aspect of this attack. The oppression stage is external. The oppression stage is external. The obsession stage is internal. That's where your sins start to become worse. It's the beginning stage of possession where the demon starts to actually get inside the person and start to work on them from the inside now, meaning pushing them away from God. That's where your aversion to religious articles, or you might not be able to pray. That's where the attack comes. And then once the will is broken down sufficiently enough, then a possession takes place, usually transient possession, and then it's a full-blown possession. But then again, in some cases, it goes right to possession, and we don't know why. There's nothing that we could pinpoint on it. Some stages are skipped, and we don't really know why that happens, but we deal with it as we get them.
Well,
That's good enough, or you need more?
No, that's good. And, it made me think of, I suspect with the work that you do, you've encountered a lot of bizarre occult practices. And one specific practice, when we're speaking of, things that might invite something like this in, seems to crop up a lot in my research and in various interviews I've conducted with others, where a demonic entity gains entrance into someone's home or someone's life, and that is Santeria. And I know you've got some strong opinions about Santeria. It's something that you've encountered more than once. Explain to the audience what you know about Santeria and why it's so dangerous. The last interview that I did with someone was with Deborah Moffat. She recently released a book called A Deadly Haunting. And in her case, this entity that tormented her family for a number of decades, a really long time, the entry point seemed to be through a caretaker who lived on the property, who was she was a Central American descent, I believe, and she did an actual Santeria ritual inside the home, and that's kind of what they saw as the kickoff point for all of the events that followed. So what is Santeria?
Well, Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean Catholicism mix. It was practiced by the slaves, and what had happened is the slave owners wouldn't allow the slaves to practice their faith. So what they said is that you have to become Catholic. So what they did is they took their 7 African powers, their deities, and they correlated them with Catholic saints, so it looked like they were worshiping a Roman Catholic God instead of actually still their deity. And that's where the Catholicism mix comes into it. But I find, for some reason, and I don't know why, when I'm dealing with a curse that's based in Santeria or Palomyambre or Voodoo, they're really nasty to deal with. I don't want to give any of the young aspiring occultists out there any information on where to go to be the biggest and the baddest, but for some reason we have a lot of difficulty with that type of sorcery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's not impossible to deal with, but it's tough. It makes it very difficult.
Right, and there was a case outlined in your book, Beware the Night, and it involved, now this isn't exactly Santeria, but it involved a Palomyambre priest. If I'm not mistaken, that's
right.
Two different things. Can you tell us what you recall about that case? It was really chilling.
Well, that wasn't an actual case of mine. That was, I had got wind, actually, from my investigation, not as a cop, but as an investigator, of the preternatural, a demonologist, that there was a guy in Brooklyn who was, we had a rash of burglaries at the cemetery. I had 205 acres of cemetery land in my area in Glendale, Queens, where I live. So there was a lot of vandals going in there and removing the bones, mostly the skeletons. And I got word there was this particular guy in Brooklyn who was practicing polyambre, and he was paying, I think at the time it was about $2,000 a skull.
Mm.
I couldn't get any proof on him. That's why I couldn't do anything to him. It's a little difficult to pin that on somebody, but as far as I know, he was never arrested, and I guess he was continuing doing his stuff.
Right. Now, am I correct in my recollection that was the case, or was it a different case where he was actively trying to speak curses against you in front of your face, or was that a different case where you came back?
That was a different case. That was actually, it was in my old neighborhood, again, of Glendale, Queens, and we were called to go to this location. It was a 6-family apartment building, and there was quite a number of tenants in there that were having experiences with things that were going on. And it just so happened that in one of the apartments, this group of Satanists, that's what they were. They weren't organized. I mean, they were what I consider the dabblers, and this Yahoo was reading from the Necronomicon while I was praying, and I heard him out in the hallway asking who I was and what denomination I was from, and I went out in the hallway, and I stood right in front of him, and he started reading from his Necronomicon, and I just started reading my prayers, and he eventually ran down those steps. And I had a couple of more dealings with him in the neighborhood that I didn't write about. Confrontations in stores, actually, because it came from the same neighborhood. See, they operated on fear, those guys. They had everybody in the neighborhood afraid, and I wasn't. So I took all of his power away from him by not showing him any fear.
Right.
And it just so happened that a couple of months later, he wound up shooting himself in the head.
Oh my gosh.
So he didn't heed my warning that the stuff that he was messing with was very dangerous. And his father was a cop. His father's a retired cop, and he got access to his father's gun, and he shot himself in the head.
I find that stories like that are sadly common. It does seem that the end game for the demons, for evil, is to break a person down, and ultimately it seems like it will always culminate in suicide. Is that something that you've noticed?
Well, it happens, but I've heard of it. I thank God I haven't had a case, that was a personal case of mine, where the person ended up, in that manner. But I hear it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I hear it in infestation cases, to believe it or not. I would get a family, and all 3 people or 4 people are saying, "I have thoughts of suicide," and I don't like hearing that, because I know what his team is trying to lead people.
Mm-hmm.
They're cowardly, and if they can get you to kill yourself, they would love that. That's a figure of speech with the demonic. They don't love anything.
Right.
But they'll torture you to try and make you commit suicide, so they can grab a hold of that soul for all eternity, and
Well, thank God that there are people out there who are actively trying to, shed light on the fact that this is something that, anyone can be delivered from through, faith in Jesus Christ and using the authority, granted to us by Jesus to cast these things out. And another common thread I find within cases of demonic manifestation is that there's often a kickoff point that started with a Ouija board or something, some kind of similar conjuring device, which many people will just say, oh, it's just a toy. It doesn't have any inherent danger involved. And I read, there's a quote where you said of the Ouija board, there ought to be a law against these evil occult toys. Why are these things so dangerous? Why do we hear about them? There was just a story recently in the news about some children that were playing with a board, and they all began to act very strangely and violently and that type of thing. What is it that makes these things so dangerous?
Well, it creates doorways. That's what it does. You open yourself up to something that you don't know, and when it does respond to you, if it does respond to you, then it's going to try to con its way into your life. And once you allow it, then, it's going to be pretty tough for you. There's a lot of people that I speak to every day that are having problems, and this is not something to be taken lightly. And you will realize that only if it happens to you, or if you've seen it firsthand. It's not a pretty thing. You play with these things, you open up these doorways, and then a whole bunch of people are going to suffer, because it's not just you, it's everybody in your family, and everybody that's connected with you is going to eventually have to suffer because of this stuff.
Right. There's this concept that we hear a lot in circles where exorcism or deliverance is practiced, and it's this idea of giving the demonic legal rights to enter into your home or to enter into your family or to enter into you. Do you believe that, generally speaking, if someone's home or someone's person is manifesting a demon, is that something that on some level they had to have welcomed or invited in? It doesn't just randomly happen?
Well, like I said, there usually has to be an invitation, but the person that suffers from it doesn't have to be the one that invited it in. If somebody had opened up a doorway on a piece of property or a home, and eventually a new family moves in, this demonic spirit can now become active in their life, and now they have the problem. And that's the dangers of that. I say that there should be a law against the evil occult toys, but the way I look at it now in this day and age is that, there shouldn't be many laws on the books to begin with. It should be us wanting to live the right way without having to be forced or told to live the right way. What we need to do is live according to the two rules that God wants us to live by, and that is that to love God with all your heart and have no other gods before him, and to love one another. And if we did that, we wouldn't need any laws. Nobody would be hurting each other. But we have the devil that's in there, and the devil doesn't want us living in harmony and peace. He wants us at war and fighting each other and divided, so he can pick us off one by one.
Amen. Amen. Well, and thank God that greater is he who is in me than he who's in the world, right? It's a chilling topic to discuss, and at the same time, I was telling you before we actually started recording that I had taken my mother to see this film that's in theaters right now, Deliver Us from Evil, and I should have thought that through a little bit more before I took her, because she certainly wasn't really prepared for what it was that she was going to experience. And that's not saying anything against the film or the way it was shot or the story was involved, but just not everyone is able to really process all of that. But it did open the door for us afterwards to have a conversation about how ultimately stories of deliverance from demons should be stories that are hopeful, because it shows that these things do not have the power, that they can be defeated. Do you find that what you do is just as much about giving people hope as it is about, confronting these powers of darkness?
Well, I should hope so. That's one of the things that I shoot for. I like to hear when people say to me, I read your book or I saw the movie and it made me go back to church.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes successful movies and books to me, is not how much money it makes, is how many people's lives have changed for the better because of it.
Right.
I don't live in the physical world as far as worrying about money and materialistic things, and I try to live as much of my day in the spiritual realm as I do in the physical realm. I try to live as close to God as I can during the day, and that just means just thinking about Him or praying or talking to somebody else about Him. I spend hours on this phone every day talking to people from all over the place, and I talk more about Jesus and the Blessed Mother and the saints than I do about the devil and his demons.
Now,
and that's where it is for me.
Right. Now, is this something that you are still very actively involved in, with the exorcisms and visiting people, not just on the phone, but going physically to their homes and helping out with that?
Oh yeah, Friday I have a possible demonic possession case, and I have quite a few lined up. For the future, it's just the way it is. I knew instinctively that there was no way that this movie was going to come out where I wasn't going to have to work with people because of it in a lot of different areas, and even areas that I wasn't expecting. And it's just a part of serving God's will. It's what I tell Him every morning, that I'm here to serve Your will. Do with me what You will. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me, because at the end of whatever road He sends me down, no matter what happens at the end of that road, hopefully I'm going to be with Him for all eternity. So it matters not what happens on this earth to me.
Mm-hmm. In the film, there's this discussion about the gift of discernment of spirits. And I know that there were portions of the film that were fictionalized because it's Hollywood and that type of thing, but you do have a certain thing that physically happens to you when you are in the presence of a demon. Is that right?
Well, I wouldn't consider that a gift. It's what happens to everybody when they're in the presence of a demon, how your body responds to it, how you feel it. All right, granted, it's going to attack each person differently because of the knowledge it has of each person. It's going to elicit the greatest amount of fear from that person. But as far as the gift of discernment, I don't have that. That was fictionalized in the movie, and I pray. I use my knowledge and I use prayer. Mm-hmm. And I know when I get a case that I'm not quite sure about, I pray on it, and I usually get a feeling. It's not a thought; it's a feeling. It's different, than just a thought that comes into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it strikes me right out of the blue, out of nowhere. And that's how I know what my answer is, because of the way it happens to me in that manner. I know when I'm getting the right information, and I know when it's my own flawed mind, So that's what's been guiding me in this work for the most part.
Have you ever had a case where there was an exorcism and you walked away from it that the demon was expelled, but that it later came back?
Actually, none that I could think of off the top of my head where it came back. We were either not successful the first time, or it might have taken a couple of tries where there were more than one demon in the person. We find that a lot. So a lot of times our exorcisms were successful, but we didn't know it because there was still a problem with the person, meaning that there were more demons. Because not every exorcism goes along according to the 6 stages of exorcism, like we're in Deliver Us from Evil, and that nice, neat little tidy scene that they had there. It doesn't work like that. Stages are skipped. Sometimes they, other stages will come before others, if you're even lucky to pinpoint them. Sometimes exorcism is very chaotic in the terms of the violence that's going on. You're not looking for anything else at that point when you're involved in a violent exorcism. You're pretty much holding off for dear life at that point, and just making sure that everybody's safe, including the person that's being exorcised. A lot of times they will try to bite themselves and pull their hair out and scratch themselves, and they do some pretty gruesome things to themselves and anybody that they can pretty much get their hands on at that point, including the assistant.
One thing that I got from reading your book and listening to interviews that you've done and all of that is that, while a lot of people will say that the things in the movie are very sensationalized and that type of thing, really when I read about some of the stuff that you've actually encountered, truth is stranger than fiction. I mean, there's some really, really scary stuff that you have personally encountered that maybe isn't exactly what is shown in the film, but the cases themselves in reality were really frightening. So if there's something that you can think of that would maybe sort of exemplify that for the audience to know that, Hollywood can come up with a lot of special effects and that type of thing, but my gosh, the things that really do happen in the world are just as chilling.
Well, somebody was talking to me earlier about contact objects used in curses and spells and rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And a story that taken place, or a case that I investigated that I didn't write about, and one of the things that happened, actually, to tell you the truth, this happened in front of Scott Derrickson and Paul Boardman.
Really?
Because they came with me when I got this case, and it was an elderly woman. She lived alone, and she lived in an apartment building, and I believe that this woman not only was suffering from demonic activity in her home, I also feel that she was suffering from mental illness.
Uh-huh.
And that's such a sad thing because, it's doubly hard to deal with.
Right.
And during my investigation, I noticed a bowl on her table in her living room, and it was about the size of my palm. Fit in my palm. That's how big it was, and it had a gold metal top on it, and it was half filled with this white powder. And I had asked her, I says, "What is that white powder?" I was expecting her to say, "Oh, it's cocaine," because that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
So she says, "Oh, that's voodoo powder." And I said, "Voodoo powder?" I said, "Where did you get it?" She says, "I got it from a Protestant minister that I know." I'm like, "You got voodoo powder from a Protestant minister?" I said, "Stay away from that man." And I put holy water in both my hands. I lifted up the metal top, and I poured the holy water. I squirted it in there, and when I did that, I got an electric shock from the tip of my finger to my elbow in the hand that was holding the lid, not the hand that was squirting the holy water. It was almost like we completed a circuit there for some reason, but I got nailed with this electricity. I don't like electricity. When I was a kid, I put 2 keys into a wall socket, and maybe that's why I am the way I am today. I don't know. They're still trying to figure it out, but I never forgot the way that felt, and it sort of was similar to what I felt with that voodoo powder. And I actually, it really knocked me for a loop for about a good minute or two. I walked by Scott Derrickson, and he looked at me, and I just don't remember anything he said to me. And I walked into the hallway area and gathered myself, and I did a little yelling at that lady at that point, and told her she's not supposed to be messing with that kind of stuff. But You know, these strange things happen, and if people don't realize that when a contact object is touched, you are going to feel that curse that's connected with it. And if you try to destroy it, you can get hit with a rebound or a booby trap that they put on it. That's what I believe did this voodoo powder that got me.
Wow.
Is when I severed the connection, that spiritual connection, what that person did. I don't know if he was a Protestant minister or not. I really couldn't get a whole lot out of this lady, to tell you the truth. But
wow,
you got to realize that when you mess with objects that were used in sorcery, you might not be the intended victim, but if you meddle with that object, then you can have yourself a serious problem, as I just showed you.
Now, when I was reading about this, and it's interesting that Scott Derrickson was there for that, I read, and I don't know how much you know about this, but that some of the actors on the film had actually themselves experienced some strange occurrences, whether it was on the set or with production. Did you hear any stories like that?
Well, I was on the set every night.
Okay.
So what it was is Scott had wanted me to show Eric Banner and Edgar Ramirez some video footage that I had of exorcisms, and I got through 2 of them. One wasn't even an exorcism. It was just it was some person getting physically assaulted by a demonic spirit. And the other one was actually an excerpt of an exorcism. And it frightened these 2 gentlemen very. I didn't know it. They didn't let on to it, when I showed it to them. But I found out later on, when I was actually on the set every night, they were telling me that they were having difficulty sleeping and they couldn't walk from a light room into a dark room. Eric Banner even said that when he would go to sleep, he'd have his Skype on at home with his family so he can have like normal noise in the background so he can actually sleep, because it really did frighten these guys. For about a week they were having difficulty, and that wasn't my intention, and that's why I don't really show these things too much, because they can have a very adverse effect on people as far as scaring the crap out of them. I could probably change a lot of skeptics' minds by just showing them some of the things that I have. But I you know what? The risk is too great for that, as far as them being, having a bad reaction, a negative reaction to it. So I try not to do that. But Scott made me, so I had to.
Sure. Well, I'm sure it helped. It at least helped the actors kind of get a better idea of what it was that they were attempting to portray, that it was this real thing, and how to see how not only the person who was being possessed acts, but also the people who are involved in the exorcism or in the encounter, how the realism of their reactions, which actually leads me to there's a really interesting dynamic in the film between Eric Bana playing you and the priest in the film. Now, I know that the name of the priest and some of the situations in the film were changed, but there is a priest who you work very closely with, and I wonder if you could tell us about him, how you met him, and sort of how you became involved with working directly with him.
Well, when I first got started in this work, I was an investigator with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they were working with Bishop McKenna at the time. So when I started to go up there and take their classes, of course the day came when they says, okay, we're going to have an exorcism, and I show up at the bishop's, and that's who I work with. And then a few years later, I actually got to become friends with Father Malachi Martin, and Father Martin and Bishop McKenna they're different, but their holiness is not different. You know, they're different personalities.
Sure.
But the holiness that they have is consistent with each other. But, you know, I could sit with Bishop McKenna and, you know, everything is respectful, and he's just a very mellow type man, and you know you're in the presence of a bishop.
Mm-hmm.
When I was with Father Martin, it was more like hanging out with a friend, because he used colorful language like I did. I don't know if he was doing that to put me at ease, but put it this way, Father Martin was the type of guy that if he was hanging out with a group of 25-year-olds, they would absolutely love him before the night was over. You know what I mean? He just had that ability to, just fit in with everybody that he was with. He wrote 16 books. He spoke 8 languages. He was, out there in Rome. He was the assistant to Cardinal Bia under Pope John the 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
He knew who Pope John the 23rd was. He was there at the time. He was deciphering ancient hieroglyphics in caves in Cairo before I was even born. But he never once treated me as if, I was anything less than him. He had no ego. Bishop McKenna had no ego. That's what I aspired to be like those two men. I consider them my mentors, and, I want to emulate their holiness. I could never approach these two men on any level, as far as I'm concerned. They were just like, I don't know. They don't make them like that anymore.
It really interested me when I found out that you did have a closeness with Father Malachi Martin, because, I'm pretty familiar with him just through my own studies, and of course he was such a prolific author and speaker on a variety of topics, super intelligent guy, reached across barriers of denomination and that type of thing, very well respected, and it's so interesting. Of course, he's since passed away, obviously, and but he wrote that book, Hostage to the Devil, one of the most.
No, that's the book.
That's the book. Yeah. I mean,
there is no other.
It's one of the most influential books on the topic, and
Father Ahmad's books are pretty good too.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give him due. He had his life of service,
mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, I never got a chance to meet him in person.
Right.
We know of each other, but I never really got a chance to meet him. But you're absolutely correct. Hostage to the Devil.
Yeah.
The top of the line.
Yeah. It's been sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I had read it previous to becoming a Christian, and of course it's something I've revisited now since becoming a Christian, and I only regret that I didn't get a chance to speak to him personally. So that's so interesting that you knew him.
Yeah, he baptized my youngest daughter right in the hospital room. She wasn't even 24 hours old. I had that all set up with him because she was born C-section, so we had it scheduled, like bringing your car in to change the oil. I brought my ex-wife in to get me the baby. It was phenomenal the way, we made an appointment for that. But I was able to tell Father Martin, I'm going to pick you up the next day at 8 o'clock. And he's like, okay, and that's what I did. So, it was great having that particular priest in my life to guide me in certain areas that he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he always did it gently, and he taught me a very big lesson, by doing that, both him and Bishop McKenna, because I'm a traditional Catholic. I follow the traditional Latin Mass,
mm-hmm.
and I didn't always. For the first 10 years of the work, I was going to my mainstream Catholic faith. I was a Eucharistic minister in there. I tried to become a deacon, but they wouldn't take me. And I'm glad that they didn't, but they never pushed me to become a traditional Catholic. We discussed it, but they never said, look, this is what you need to do. So that's the way I do my thing. I I'm not going to preach to people. I'll talk to people about God and the Blessed Mother and the saints and all that stuff. But and if they ask me about my traditional Catholic faith, I'll tell them my best friend is a Lutheran.
Mm-hmm.
He's a better man than I could ever aspire to be. Just because he's a Lutheran means that he's not going to, get eternal salvation. Now, I know all my Catholic friends, my staunch Catholic friends, are going to jump on me for this. But I don't care, because Bishop McKenna and Father Malachi Martin said the same thing. There are good people in this world. God knows who they are, and they're from different faiths than Roman Catholicism. And that's the way I stand on it. See, I came out in public there.
There. We got you on the record, Ralph.
Yep. Hey, I'll say it to anybody. I don't care. They call me a heretic because I believe that. Okay.
Oh, well,
I'm a heretic.
Let me tell you, I've been called a heretic myself, so we're in we're in good company. It's interesting how people are so quick to lob accusations like that against one another when it just diminishes what we're called to do, which is to apply grace and love to one another, and so it's really refreshing to hear that. Now, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because you mentioned your daughter, and I was just wondering, there's that aspect in the film where it shows that some of what you were dealing with the work came and sort of troubled your family. And could you speak to whether or not there was any truth to that? Did things happen to your family? There was crossover?
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt, yeah. Not quite in the context that was in the movie, but there was enough things that my the girls had seen. I am divorced now, and but back then they experienced a lot of stuff that they wouldn't have if I wasn't doing what I was doing. And it did create a lot of difficulties in the house, as far as the relationship, because the first thing that the demonic go after is a marriage. That's the first thing they want to destroy when they come on a scene. An investigator is no different. They want that marriage to end, and that's one of the things I tell a lot of people when they say, hey, listen, I want to get involved in this work. Are you married? Yeah, I have 2 young little kids. Well, you know what you're asking here? You're actually asking to have this happen within your own life. Because when you become a threat to the demonic and you're exposing them, then they're going to come after you. But if you're not a threat to them, what would the sense be for them to go after you?
Sure.
They're not going to get anything out of it. They already got you.
Right. There's a lot of people who think that if you're a Christian, you can't be touched. And I've always maintained that, Christians have the biggest target on their backs. They're the biggest prize.
I don't like to say that, but you're absolutely right. Look at Annalise Michelle, very religious girl. Right. Very religious girl. We don't know why she got possessed.
Right.
But I think that the message was sort of given to us in the story of Annalise Michelle. When the Blessed Mother had visited her and said, "I'll take you from this," and Annalise Michelle said, "No, people need to know the devil really exists," and I believe that she became possessed. God allowed that to happen so people could become aware of the reality of him. And what he can do. And I really see that if we as a society keep pushing God out, he's going to eventually loosen some pretty nasty stuff on this earth, as a chastisement. People say, well, why did you do that? Why does he allow that to happen? Well, if he constantly calls people and they don't heed his call, there isn't anything stopping him from utilizing the demonic to get people to realize he's calling them, because I have never went into a house that was demonically infested where there wasn't anybody in that house that didn't believe in God at that point. That's the only thing you can believe in. And you'll get religion real quick when that devil starts to kick his heels up.
What would you say? Now, you mentioned about the dangers that are the potential dangers against a person's family, but let's say someone approached you and said, I want to be involved in the work that you do. How would you tell them to be prepared, or would you advise them to not jump into it? I mean, what would you tell them? Because that seems like a pretty lofty thing to say that they want to get involved in.
Well, I got a few already.
Uh-huh.
And for some reason, I just said, yeah, okay, I'll accept you. And there are other people out there that I speak to about it. I ask them, what kind of faith do you have? Do you have a relationship with God? Everybody can say, well, yeah, I do. And then I start questioning them about their faith. And when I find out that they really don't know what they're talking about, It's like, do you really go to Mass? Do you really go? Or are you just giving me a line?
Right.
People don't realize that if you call me up and you talk to me about things, I'm going to interview you.
Sure.
I'm going to interrogate you. I want to know who you are. I teach a lot of people, and I'm probably going to be starting online teaching. I don't know. It's all free. I don't charge any money for this stuff. So I have to see, how much time I have in relation to what I need to do with investigating cases. But I have a group of people already that have expressed interest, and I accepted them as students because I have good feelings about them. And I'll teach them, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to accept them as an investigator. At the end of the course, we'll see. We'll see who still wants to do it. We'll see, who I feel would make a good investigator. I have the right to choose who I want to work with and who I don't want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I'm not ultimately the one that chooses people for this field. I mean, that's God's decision on who He wants. But if I don't get that feeling, then I really have to see where it's going to lead. But
sure,
a lot of people say they want to do this stuff, and you know what? They have no idea what they're asking for.
One thing you mentioned there, and I think it's worth stressing, is that if there's any skeptics out there as to your intentions, you do not charge people for the work that you do. Is that right? You don't accept any payment for a case or anything like that?
Nope. And they're still calling me a scam artist and a fraud. As if I'm going from door to door saying, hey, you look possessed to me, give me $1,000 and I'll straighten it out for you. It doesn't work like that. These people call me. I don't go to them. They call me up.
Right.
And I don't charge them any money. It costs me money, actually, to get the case. Try going down to Maryland or Massachusetts. See how much it costs you in gas and all the other stuff that you need to bring along with you.
Yeah.
I don't pay no mind to skeptics. They don't mean anything to me. They don't affect me in the least. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think. I'll watch what they do, because I'm not a pushover. You're not going to come messing around my door. I can guarantee you that. But as far as what you say and what you think, you could tell that walking, because it doesn't mean anything to me.
Right. And everybody's got an opinion.
I'm sorry for getting a little heated, but
Listen, I just
they call me a scam artist, and all I'm doing is trying to help people. And they're nasty about it. They call you names, but I know where they're coming from. I consider those people like that Satan's wind-up toys.
Sure.
They have no clue. They're clueless. He winds them up, and they just bump into the wall. That's how stupid they are.
Yeah, I mean, to a lesser extent, but I can relate, because I have people who, particularly since I shifted my focus with my work to a Christian worldview and a biblical worldview. Everyone seemed fine with what I was doing previously, but now I get a lot more heat from people who think that I'm trying to make money or peddling something. And in all honesty, if I was in it for the money, I would have quit this a long time ago, you know, because it seems that the more involved you are in doing any kind of work, the less, any kind of work that is for His glory, the less monetary concerns really consume you. I don't think about, whether or not I'm going to get a huge fat paycheck for what I'm doing, and I sense that that's very much how you are motivated as well.
Well, I don't want my reward here on earth. I want my reward in heaven, where it's greater.
Right.
Mama didn't raise no fool.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to have a reward in this place? I mean, the way I look at this world, it's hard, it's rough. People aren't doing what they're supposed to do, and I'm looking to get out of it. I'm not certainly looking forward to dying because I don't want to leave my family. But I'll tell you something: if it wasn't for my family or my friends, there wouldn't be any attachment to this world for me.
Right.
It's not where I try to operate. I want to be close to God at all times. The feeling is a lot better than the best feeling you can have in life, just in general.
Absolutely. When we were talking a little bit about this type of work, obviously what I do is really nothing similar to what you do, but, I try to focus on exposing the darkness for people who might not be so willing to accept that it exists. And you provide a really excellent bit of advice, and I'm just going to read this quote from you that says, "To obsess over occult horrors is unhealthy and dangerous to the soul. Lifting up your eyes to the wonder and majesty of God's creation is the cure. It's only through His mercy that we can survive the dark night of evil." I know all too well that it's a slippery slope where one can become easily obsessed with this type of research. And I would just love for you to expand upon your feelings on this. How can becoming too involved become dangerous to an individual, and how can we safeguard ourselves while still working to expose and rebuke these powers of darkness?
Well, it's just like I said, I don't dwell on the demons or the devil. When I'm not handling a case, I think more about God. I start my day with my prayer regimen. I pray my rosary every morning, and the day is not going to proceed for me until I complete my rosary. Jesus loved His mother more than anything that God, His Father, ever created. So, the way I look at it is this, is if the Blessed Mother is good enough for Jesus, then you know what? She's good enough for me, too. You see, Jesus is going to be our judge. He's going to judge us at the end. And God gave us Him as a judge, and He rightfully deserves to judge us because of what He did for us. He died on that cross. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody that does that for me has my total attention and my total love. And if His mother is His favorite, then she's my favorite too.
It's interesting because this seems to be something that, and I'm sure you've seen it just in your work and the different people you've encountered, different investigators, different people who are in one way or another called to focus on, or at minimum involve themselves with this type of thing. This obsession can grip you to where you're almost paying more lip service to the darkness than you are to the light, so to speak. And I think it is such an important thing to tell people that while it is good to be aware, it is good to be armed with knowledge, we are to put on the full armor of God and stand against these things and that type of thing, but to not lose focus of what our hope is and where our hope lies in Jesus Christ. And that's ultimately what it is all about. And when I read that quote of yours, it struck me so much, because before I was Christian, I found myself so easily obsessed with things. Like if I was looking for inner peace, or whatever kind of new age mumbo jumbo I was into at the time, meditating on yoga or whatever. Whatever the case was, I would become consumed by it. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but it also depends on what type of personality you have. Are you the type of person that's driven to distraction, as far as immersing yourself completely and utterly in every single thing that you do? I would just say that's a personality quirk and not something that you would consider, diabolical. If I'm getting the question right, I don't know. Am I on the track, or am I totally in left field?
No, yeah. I mean, you definitely kind of pinpointed a little bit of the type of person that I am. I can go off on a tangent and just become really super focused on that for a long time. And sometimes it's almost like the Lord just snaps me out of it and is like, Natalina, okay, that was a good job. Now let's focus on something else. But I can say that, like, without that sort of that Christian biblical worldview or guidance, to where it would become an obsession almost to the point of consuming me, and I've seen it, happen to others, to where it's like it takes them to some kind of dark places because they're so overwhelmed by the thing that they're involving themselves in.
Well, there are people that with their faith, the fervor that goes along with the faith, the passion, it can be applied to certain Christians also. The ones that, you see them in the church, and they're like praying, and they're in another world. They just, they're totally consumed. Mm-hmm. And I find for myself that my spirituality goes in cycles, where I'll go through a period of that fervent period. I'll do certain novenas that will be like, I got to do them, and that's it. And then eventually, when I'm done with the novena, it wanes, and I go back to a more calmer type of faith, of spirituality. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. There's times where that happens to me too.
It's cyclic. Yeah, I look at things as going in a cycle, and there are people that look at the occult in the same way that we look at, our faith. It's their religion. It's what they do, and they're bent on serving Satan. And that's what they do. Like the way we're bent on serving God, they're bent on serving Satan. And that what it says in Scripture, that there'll be enmity between his seed and her seed, and he'll be striking at her heels, and she'll be crushing his head. So we know who's already lost the battle.
Right.
We've already known who won the battle, and we know how to obtain heaven if we choose it. If you don't, well, then you choose the devil, and he'll get you, and he'll keep you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. One thing I wanted to ask you, we're running towards the end of our discussion, which makes me sad because this is so interesting. But one thing I wanted to ask you, another thing that I've discussed somewhat regularly on the show, it's become an increasingly important topic, when we turn on the news and when we see just so much violence and hatred, and even cases of possession. There was that recent case in Indiana where a priest and a doctor witnessed a kid walking up a wall.
There's a lot more than that.
Yeah, it was.
Cops saw it. That was, those types of cases come along every 10, 15 years. You know?
Yeah, where it was just, impossible to discredit because of just the eyewitness factor. But I want to know, from your perspective, being so deeply involved in the work, do you believe that supernatural occurrences, or more specifically, demonic manifestations, are on the rise? Are they becoming more prevalent, or is it just something that we're just, because of our media, seeing more? There are a lot of people who say it seems that there is a definite increase in what, I guess secularly we would call paranormal activity. Do you see an increase as well?
Well, I'm of the mind that, like I said earlier, the more you push the devil out of society, the more you push God out of society, the more the devil is going to fill the void that is left.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to enter that space, and if we keep pushing him out, eventually he's going to loosen a lot of nasty things. And I had a couple of conversations with Father Martin about this, and what he had said to me is that we're going to see a rise in child possession. And I asked him why. And he said it's going to be a chastisement for the parents for not teaching their children about God. And that's a scary thought, because when I saw the Indiana thing, and then I started to read a rash of these little kids stabbing other people in the name of demonic spirits and the devil and all that stuff,
mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see that it's not only going to be a possession that we're going to have to deal with, we're also going to have to deal with the evil and the violence that comes along with it. Because who is more easier to manipulate? It would be a child,
mm-hmm.
And if God's going to allow the devil that kind of power in children's lives, we're going to have a very tough time.
Yeah, that's a very, very sobering thought. And I just thought of one other thing that I did want to ask you about, because even in the circles that I travel in with my discussions and research, and the people who listen to this show and different shows that I like to listen to, there seems to be this one side thinks that Satanism is something that you should put in quotes, that it's just sort of this all-encompassing, whenever someone is interested, like, goth kids or whatever. But then there are others who say that it's a real, legitimate, people are out there worshiping Satan as a religious practice. And you had mentioned that you encountered this person who was a Satanist. Is that something that you would say you have encountered more than once? Are there really people out there who have covens and that legitimately are practicing what we would call like the religion of Satanism?
Well, of course, I mentioned the dabblers to you. Those are the idiots that run around with the tattoos and, they want to scare everybody by, letting them know that they worship the devil and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't worry about those guys. I don't worry about any of them. But the ones that could possibly be worse, and they are, is the Satanist that you meet that you have no idea is a Satanist, because he doesn't want you to know it. He doesn't need for you to know it. As a matter of fact, he needs for you to not know it so he can do a thing without anybody watching him. And those are what I consider generational
mm-hmm.
or organized Satanists, and I've dealt with them too. But the differences between the Yahoo, that capped himself, and this other gentleman is that he was a gentleman. He never made a sound as far as who he was. He came to the scene. He took their grimoire, or their book, their Bible that they used, the reverse Bible, and he removed it from the location. And there wasn't anything said in the way of nastiness. So those are the people that I really want to watch. It's people like that.
Right.
Because they're the ones that are actually very effective.
Right. Well, we know from Scripture it says, no wonder, for even Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. That's the best way to manipulate someone, is to put yourself out there as though you are this good person, this upstanding citizen, this gentleman, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Ralph, we are at the end of the show, and it's been an absolutely fascinating one. I am so grateful to you. It's been my honor to have you on the show. And
oh, please, come on, stop.
It's been so cool to talk to you.
It's my pleasure.
Where can people find, if they want to pick up the book that you wrote? We know that they can go see the movie. It's still in theaters now, but your book, I really recommend it. Where can people find it?
Well, it's not called Beware the Night. It is called Deliver Us from Evil. Hollywood stole my title, like they stole my life and everything else. So, I used to tease Scott. I'm like, you leave anything left for me, Scott? And he's like, no, pretty much no. We take everything. So, on Amazon, in the bookstore, it's called Deliver Us from Evil, the same title as the movie, and so you can get it. Anywhere you get buy a book. It's an audio book too, from what I understand.
Well, that's so awesome, and I really recommend to people to pick it up, because it's if you saw the movie first and it intrigued you, you should definitely pick up the book and hear the story straight from the guy who lived it and continues to live it. It's remarkable, and I just wish you all the best. I pray for safety and protection for you and your family, and
thank you.
I will just look forward to hopefully talking to you again in the future.
Okay, same here.
All right. Have a great night, Ralph.
You too. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Matt Lena. For the latest headlines and program schedule, please visit extraordinaryintelligence.com.
If anybody messes with me, I'll just say, I know a guy.
Yeah, I know a guy. Hey, forget about it, right?
With my Midwestern accent.
Nah, you did it good. A little more practice, you'd be all right.
Okay, I'll work on it.
So,